Hello there, my name's Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Well, 'tis the season, y'all, so today we're going to paint our yearly Christmas card. So we're going to paint this nice little snowman right here, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a photo that was taken during the daytime and we are going to kind of transform it into a dusk or nighttime setting. So I'll show you how to do that, so let's do this! Here are the materials for this week. If you want to, you can screenshot that, or they're listed in the description of the video for you. Since we're making this into a holiday card, I have the word joy traced out along the bottom, and I'm going to mask that out so that it can be the white of the paper. So first I am dipping my brush into a mixture of liquid dish soap and water, and then into the masking fluid, and we're going to mask out this word so that it can, so I can paint around it and not have to worry about it. Once I finish that, I always allow at least 30 minutes for that to dry, because if you go in too early, the water will spread that rubber on top of the paper and it will not accept paint from there on out. Once that's all dry, I prepare a very, very watery mixture of Ultramarine Blue. We're going to use this for the background. So I start at the bottom and work my way up. We're just going to give this kind of a once over of that very watery Ultramarine Blue. And then I'm going to actually come back in and lift a little bit of it out off of the snowman himself, which is very easy since he's such a big, like, circular figure. Then I'm coming back in with a little thicker consistency around the joy here, because we want that to be able to be red, and in the background because we're taking this into a nighttime scene, or at least dusk from the daytime scene that we're looking at. So we're going to make everything darker. That's why I put a whole coat of blue over everything, because you're not really going to have any just pure white in this other than the letters, of course. So keeping that in mind, I actually decided I needed to come back over the top of the snowman with more blue, because, I mean, you're not going to have that just bright shining white if the whole thing's going to be more of a nighttime thing. Now I'm just adding more and more color to get this to the darkness that I would like. Next I'm adding in kind of almost like a drop shadow type of a thing around the letters. I just don't want them to be lost, and we know how much lighter this stuff dries. It's all looking a bit flat for me, so I'm going to add in some Dioxizine Purple into the background and then give it a spray to make it spread. And then I'm going to come back in with even darker Ultramarine Blue. And then, of course, since it's so wet, it continues to encroach on the snowman. You have to lift it out multiple times. And then I kind of got tired of doing that, so I crunched up some shop towels and dabbed it out. And that's kind of giving it a nice ethereal look that I think will work nice for this. It's, I mean, you know, it's supposed to be magical, so. Now that that's all nice and dry, I'm going to come back in and do the shadows on the shadow side and underneath each segment of the body. So I've got a nice watery mix of Ultramarine Blue, a little bit darker than the background of what it is right now. And I'm adding that in, and then I'm rinsing off the color from my brush and just using plain water to smooth the edges. That's how you layer in watercolor. You just put it on there and smooth it with clean water along the edges. And that usually gives you a nice smooth transition from shadow to light. As we get to his face, we want to make sure and put shadow under the hat and underneath each element of his face, including like the little eyes and the carrot and, you know, all of that stuff. You just gotta put in that extra little bit of reality. Then of course we have to add all of the trampled and crushed snow down here, all the bumpy stuff, and I'm just adding that in there, and like I said, blending with clean water along the edges to make it smooth. I think it could just stand to be a little bit darker in the shadow area, so I'm doing that and smoothing with clean water. Next, I'm going to allow all of that to dry very thoroughly because I'm going to do an effect with some masking fluid on top of this. So eventually what I'm going to do is splatter the entire thing with white gouache to make it look like it's snowing. But for right now, what I'm doing is I'm going to use some masking fluid and I'm going to splatter it all over the background as it is right now. And then when I make the background darker on top of that, then you'll have lighter spots, but not as light as the gouache. So it will afford some depth with the snow splatters. Now that all of that masking fluid has had a chance to dry, I'm coming back in and I'm wetting the entire thing with a flat brush with just plain water. All around the snowman and right up to the snow line, and we're going to come back in with thicker consistency of ultramarine blue. Then I'm going to add in some indigo as well to darken it up. I'm just going to add it in specific areas just kind of randomly, and then I'm going to also add in a little bit of that dioxazine purple, and really that's just kind of affording some variety and putting some interest in here because we don't want everything to just be flat ultramarine blue. That would be a little bit boring, I think, anyway. So I'm just adding in some different blue tones and different cool tones here. Nice and dark, because we want this to be either dusk or like nighttime. And then I'm taking some clean water on a brush and I'm softening that snow edge there because it got to be a little bit of a harsh edge. And then we're just going to let it spread and do its thing. I think that we need to make this darker down here or we're in danger of losing the joy. But anyway, we're just going to darken this up just to make sure that you're able to read this once we take the masking fluid off. And I'm using ultramarine and indigo and a tiny little bit of the dioxazine purple. And I'm going to make it extra dark right underneath the letters just to give it a little bit of a drop shadow type effect. And then I'm letting that dry one more time before we start in on the details on the snowman. We're going to start work on the scarf, and in the photo it is a very bright kind of Christmassy red, but remember we're taking this into the nighttime, so we're going to have to do a little bit of a darker red. So I'm starting out with Alizarin Crimson, and then I'm going to mix in a little bit of that indigo to it to make it cooler and kind of more purpley. Since we have such a blue cast in the sky and everything around it, then that means that everything else is going to have a blue cast. And that is part of how you change a daytime scene into a nighttime scene. Make everything cooler and everything darker than it would be. So I'm just adding that red in there, all nice and flat, and then I'm adding in some more indigo into the shadow areas, and that's going to make it look like it's folded over. Next, I'm mixing up an orange for the carrot nose. So I'm starting out with French Vermillion and then adding in Naples Yellow. And then I'm adding in some Ultramarine Blue to cool that down significantly because, like I said, it's nighttime. Everything is going to have a blue cast. And of course, we're going to go a little bit darker on the bottom side of it for some shadow. And then we're going to come back in with just some straight, very, very dark indigo blue on the eyes and the mouth and everything else that's very dark. And we could come in with just plain black, but since everything needs a blue cast here, this indigo is absolutely perfect. It's very nice and intense, but it also has a blue cast, indigo blue, you know. So it's perfect for this. Now I'm going to water that down a little bit for the hat because it does have some light areas and some dark areas, and then I'm going to come back in with the thicker consistency of it for the shadows on the shadow sides. And then I take a damp brush and lift out a little bit of the contours of the hat. Next, we're mixing up colors for the branches on the arms. So I'm starting out with sepia, and then I'm going to mix in some of the indigo to blue it down, of course. Just going to add that straight in here with a nice number 4 brush, and since the word on the card is joy, we're making his little arms in a nice big joyful uplifting position. I feel like that will work very nicely with this. And I'm adding a little bit more definition in the shadow on the scarves. I think a little bit of it got lost there. I think we need a little bit more texture at the bottom here, so I'm just adding in some more bumpy snow. That's the ultramarine, and then I'm just, of course, softening it with clean water. I've allowed all of that to dry, and now I'm using my rubber cement eraser to take off all of the masking fluid. All of the snow, all of the lettering, the whole thing. Next, I want to show a little bit of snow accumulation on the hat and scarf and different things, so I'm bringing in an X-Acto knife. You could probably use a razor blade. And I'm just scraping off the top layer of the paper, and that'll take it right back down to the white of the paper. You just want to make sure and not press too hard, otherwise you're going to cut through the paper, and then that won't be fun for anybody because you'll have ruined it. But it takes off a nice splotchy pattern here, and it looks perfect for snow. And I'm going to go ahead and do that along every element, including the arms and the scarf and the little things on the jacket and like all of it. It is time for the gouache splatter, so I'm putting some out here, and apparently my gouache is really old and it's kind of separated, but anyway. So I use the good part here, add a bunch of water, and then I'm just gonna splatter it all over the whole thing. I might have gotten a little carried away with it. I mean, he's kind of in the middle of a blizzard, but I mean, whatever. And here's the finished product, all dry and with the tape removed and all that kind of thing. And if you should so desire, you could scan this and print it and use it as your Christmas card, if you do that kind of thing. I'm never quite industrious enough to do it, but hey, I mean, if you do, then go for it. And there you have it, a joyful little snowman for the holiday season that you can share with all your buddies if you do that. Anyways, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of that stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.